Have you ever wanted to lead a real country through World War III without actually causing World War III? Well, Supremacy World War III is a free online PvP strategy game where you take control of a modern nation and try and outmaneuver up to 99 other players in real time. You'll manage your economy, you'll build up a military, tanks, jets, submarines, and decide whether to make friends or just go full-on warmonger. It runs over days or weeks so you can play at your pace, and yes, it's cross-platform, so you can pick up your war wherever you are. Season 19 just dropped with new control points, a massive world map, and 2 new legendary officers, Alexei and Raphael. Plus, if you're new, there's an elite Railgun unit waiting. It's part of a starter pack worth $40, but only for the next 30 days. Click the link in the description to try it out on PC, iOS, or Android and claim your starter pack. And now today's video.
2026 is off to a bit of a crazy start, and nobody knows it better than Mr. Nicolas Maduro. Just short of a few days ago, Maduro was a dictator ruling over a sovereign nation backed up by powerful international backers in Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran, and protected by tens of thousands of loyal soldiers in his presidential palace in Caracas. Today, Maduro was arraigned in a Manhattan court in United States custody after one of the most stunning smash-and-grab military operations in modern history. The dust is still settling across Venezuela, with a new president nominally in charge, and US President Donald Trump making clear that the world's most oil-rich country is under new management. So, how the hell did this happen? How did the United States just sweep into a well-armed, internationally supported capital city and snatch a dictator and his wife out of bed within mere hours? How in the world did the United States manage to be so precise, and why did they whisk away Maduro but decline to deal with the rest of his inner circle? Also, where are things headed now, and why does it seem like everything is moving so bloody quickly? And then there's the other questions. Where was Vladimir Putin? Where was Xi Jinping? Where was Tehran or Havana or Pyongyang? And what in the world is gonna come next? Getting our bearings. If you've been trying your best to keep up with the chaos in Venezuela, then we couldn't really blame you if your head is spinning. For months, it's been obvious that something was going to happen in Venezuela, quite possibly involving American boots on the ground. But even among the most bullish of global conflict analysts, practically nobody anticipated that it would be this quick or this easy for American forces once Washington chose to act. And we've got to be very clear, even in a world that's seen some stunning feats of military intelligence recently, like Israel's pager attacks against Hezbollah or Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb across Russia, this operation to take out Maduro was on another level. Applaud Washington's actions or condemn them, but America's military achievement is just undeniable. In a combined aircraft, helicopter, missile, and special operations ground assault, the United States nullified Venezuela's defenses, abducted the nation's leader and his wife, and got out within just 4 hours. There was no urban battle, no military occupation, no coordinated response from Venezuelan forces, and all with zero loss of American life. So the obvious first question to ask is, how did the United States pull this off? Well, according to outlets with sources all up and down America's political and military leadership, this operation was months in the making, constantly rehearsed, and drew upon excellent real-time intelligence. According to Reuters, America's premier foreign intelligence service, the CIA, has had a team on the ground in close proximity to Maduro for months, monitoring his daily movements, creating, quote, an exact replica of Maduro's safe house, and establishing such a clear understanding of his daily life and patterns that they could essentially choose when to snatch him. The special operators who took the lead in the operation, America's hyper-elite Delta Force, were able to practice the operation with high precision before it took place. According to US leaders, the mission, codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, was supposed to take place days before it actually did, but was delayed initially due to imperfect weather conditions. The operation itself leveraged over 150 American aircraft launched from 20 bases across the Western Hemisphere, according to the chairman of America's Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. Those aircraft included stealthy F-22 and F-35 fighter jets, the electronic jamming EA-18 Growler, the B-1 supersonic bomber, aerial refuelers, command and control planes, other fighter aircraft, and surveillance drones. Gonna have to take a breath here, including at least one copy of the secretive and rarely seen RQ-170. During the attack, stealth fighters focused on picking off Venezuelan air defenses before the B-1s and F-A-18 Super Hornets charged through the gaps they'd created and hit bases, strategic surveillance sites, and other essential points to neutralize the Venezuelan defenses. At the same time, using undisclosed capabilities that Trump referred to as, quote, a certain expertise that we have, most of Caracas was plunged into darkness, with other military capabilities seemingly rendered ineffective from afar. Closer to the ground, the Delta Force raid relied on a convoy of military helicopters, including fast attack Apaches and Vipers, troop transport Blackhawks, and heavy lift Chinooks capable of carrying dozens of operators per chopper. Flying low over the city and relying on pilots and support from the elite 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, better known as the Night Stalkers, the convoy took fire and sustained non-lethal damage to one helicopter, but successfully inserted US forces at Maduro's compound. Once on the ground, Delta Force and accompanying operators from the FBI's hostage rescue team made their way through the carefully rehearsed breaching plan that they had laid out, with Venezuelan authorities now stating that a large proportion of Maduro's personal guard were killed in the process. Once again, US forces made contact with Maduro and established control quickly enough that he was unable to access a safe room. Instead, he was quickly spirited away to an amphibious landing ship, the USS Iwo Jima. Of course, as impressive as that lightning assault may have been, it begs another question. How did the United States manage to be so precise and prevent things from going sideways at any of the countless possible points of failure that it could have come up against? Clearly, US intelligence went a very long way in making the operation possible, not just as it related to Maduro's compound and his daily habits, but the locations of Venezuelan defensive capabilities and the means that would be most effective in taking them out. The, quote, certain expertise that Trump alluded to, granting the US the ability to take most of Caracas offline, is obviously relevant, and while it's not clear exactly what ability that is, it appears that the US just demonstrated the ability to essentially switch off many of Venezuela's defensive capabilities, as well as its broader infrastructure. According to US sources who spoke to the global press, Venezuelan forces did offer a measure of resistance, but nowhere near what they should have been able to achieve on paper, given the presence of various kinds of Russian-made anti-air defense systems in the country. And just before we continue, I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce ourselves to the many people who are seeing our coverage for the very first time. Got a feeling this video is going to be popular. We here at WarFronts are a relatively new addition to the world of conflict analysis, but we believe that we're offering something here on YouTube that can cut through the noise that we've all become used to across global media. At WarFronts, our team makes it our mission to deliver clear, focused explanations of conflicts and geopolitical shifts across the globe with all the context and all the nuance that you should be able to have at your disposal. We don't claim to be experts. We don't claim to be unbiased. Instead, we try to be a conduit for all the very best expert analysis that we can find, presented in ways that make sense and actually matter, while staying aware of our biases so they don't compromise our content as best we can. If that sounds like something you'd like to have as part of your media diet, please do consider subscribing, and if you'd like to support the work we do, then check out our premium website, fronts.co. There we dive even deeper on underreported conflicts and invite experts and award-winning journalists to share what they really believe you need to know. Your support there allows us to expand our team, produce more free offerings like this one, and protect our financial independence so that we never have to compromise. Thank you for checking us out, and now back to it. It's just $5 a month, by the way, or $50 a year. I think it's a good deal, but I would say that, wouldn't I? Anyway. Burning questions. As the dust settles, we've also got to account for the possibility that the US may have had more help on the inside than Maduro had initially bargained for. And that brings up another question. Why didn't the US take out the rest of Maduro's inner circle? The line of succession for Venezuela's regime is clear. Maduro's vice president was a woman named Delcy Rodriguez, who not only avoided any US attention during the operation, but has now been placed into the role of acting president with the help of Venezuela's Supreme Court, which also survived. Venezuela's defense minister, General Vladimir Padrino, emerged scot-free, which we know partly because he's been very active on television across Venezuela in the aftermath. The rest of Maduro's inner circle, whether politicians or the national elite, largely seemed to be just fine. According to the New York Times, US officials had already decided that Delcy Rodriguez was a perfectly acceptable replacement for Maduro, largely because of her management of Venezuela's oil industry. As one unnamed senior US official told the Times, quote, "I've been watching her career for a long time, so I have some sense of who she is and what she's about," end quote. According to some analysts, America's endorsement of Rodriguez and its decision to avoid fully decapitating Venezuela's leadership should raise another question. How many of these high-level officials were either okay with Maduro being removed or possibly even helped to sell him out? We've also got to ask about Venezuela's main opposition figures, recent Nobel Peace Prize recipient Maria Corina Machado and her deputy, who would have rightfully claimed the mantle of president in a recent election that the opposition claimed that Maduro had rigged in his own favor. Machado and her allies have actively courted Trump for months, even dedicating her Nobel Peace Prize to him after she received it and endorsing Trump's claims of US election fraud in 2020. But now, Trump appears to have turned his back on Machado, claiming over the weekend that she didn't have the, quote, respect that she would have needed in Venezuela in order to govern. In some ways, the decision does make sense. Although many millions of Venezuelans backed the decision to oust Maduro, according to recent polling, that doesn't mean that Venezuelans would accept a former opposition leader who was unilaterally installed through American gunboat diplomacy. Not only that, but a large portion of Venezuela's military is thought to remain loyal to Maduro, and if Machado had simply been ushered into power immediately, her life probably would have been in rather acute danger. Maduro's own former vice president is much less likely to face that problem, even though she was part of a regime that America had routinely described as illegitimate. Regardless, her recent statements to the press opposing America's actions don't seem to be a problem. Quoting Marco Rubio again, "We're not going to judge moving forward based simply on what's said in press conferences. There's a lot of different reasons why people go on TV and say certain things in these countries, especially 15 hours or 12 hours after the person who used to be in charge of the regime is now in handcuffs." End quote. But the decision to clear the way for Delcy Rodriguez instead of Machado brings up a question we can't answer yet. Is Washington going to try and elevate an elected Venezuelan leader to the presidency as quickly as possible, or has it selected a friendly enough alternative that it now intends to keep in place for the foreseeable future? Closely related to that question is the question of who's really in charge of Venezuela today. Again, Donald Trump gave at least some indicator of the answer, stating over the weekend that the US would, quote, run Venezuela for the next little while as part of an unspecified group. Trump explained that the US was, quote, not afraid of boots on the ground and would fix Venezuelan oil infrastructure to, quote, get the oil flowing. On Sunday, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio refuted that claim, instead telling US television audiences that America would continue to enforce its oil quarantine and use its leverage to force internal changes, but would not govern Venezuela directly. Also on Sunday, Trump seemed to double down on his own claims, specifically as it relates to new President Delcy Rodriguez, quote, if she doesn't do what's right, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. During that interview with the New York Post, Trump also stated that if Rodriguez does do what America wants, the US won't need to station troops in the country. So, another massive question. What does America want? Given Trump, Rubio, and other US officials' intense focus on Venezuelan oil in the last few days, we'll take their word for it, but there's more nuance to the oil situation than that. Venezuela is the largest proven oil reserves of any nation on Earth at over 300 billion barrels, but it's not the same stuff that comes flowing out of, say, Alaska or the Gulf states. Venezuelan heavy crude requires specialized processing and refining in order to be usable, and not many countries have the facilities to process it. But guess who does? America. It's got 6 specialized facilities on the American Gulf Coast, just about 2,000 miles or 3,200 kilometers away. There's also a major strategic element to account for. China is the largest recipient of Venezuelan oil exports, accounting for roughly 80% of what Venezuela sends out. Even though that oil makes up a fairly small portion of Chinese consumption, the US is still going to benefit by taking that oil out of Beijing's reach, especially with American companies like Chevron already operating in Venezuela and poised to invest massively in rehabilitating oil infrastructure in the control of a US-friendly regime. And speaking of China, it's time to get to the title question of this very episode. Where the hell was Russia, or China, or any of Venezuela's other adversaries? Where Russia is concerned, the short answer is that Russia did try to help Maduro, but what Russia was able to offer turned out to be badly insufficient. Russia has supplied Venezuela with most of its meaningful air defense systems, as well as fighter jet-launched missiles that were supposed to be a threat to US forces, but those air defenses either didn't perform as expected, were suppressed and destroyed by US aircraft, or were neutralized by whatever America did behind the scenes to cripple Venezuela's defense, or possibly a combination of all three. Venezuela's Russian-made ship-killer missiles had to be launched from its Russian-made fighter aircraft, which US sources indicate were destroyed on the ground or otherwise neutralized. And as for a larger real-time effort to intervene, what was Russia supposed to do? Its fighting forces are committed almost completely in Ukraine, and it lacks the capability to send its spare forces halfway around the world quickly in any meaningful numbers. It certainly couldn't have projected enough power to break America's naval and air dominance in the Southern Caribbean, especially with its recent buildup of forces, and America's actual operation against Maduro was open and shut in just hours. Once the US decided to move against Caracas, the most that Moscow could do was issue condemnations from the sidelines. As for Venezuela's other allies, each of them had their own reasons not to come to Maduro's defense. While China opposes this sort of military action by the US and urged the US to, quote, stop toppling the government of Venezuela, its oil interests simply don't justify the costs of a direct intervention. China just doesn't take direct military action abroad under any circumstances, and its ability to project forces all the way across the Pacific remains highly questionable. The nation of Cuba, which has long supported Venezuela as a direct backer, did try to support Maduro as best it could. According to US sources, Maduro lived under the protection of Cuban bodyguards and military advisors, while his country relied on Cuban scientists, doctors, intelligence contacts, and other assistance to function. The Cuba's actual military is badly outdated, and it's hardly a threat to the US, especially because it's so close to the US mainland that it's within reach of basically everything Washington has. As for Iran, suffice it to say that the leadership there has more than enough problems of its own right now. Zooming all the way out to look at global affairs, there's a final question to ask. Whatever happened to that new, multipolar global order that leaders like Xi and Putin, analysts across the globe, and even our WarFronts team have been talking about recently? And really, the answer is simple. This is multipolarity. Under the new set of rules that increasingly govern power and geopolitics across the globe, powerful nations are gaining increased latitude to take unchallenged, sometimes violent action in the countries that are within their sphere of influence, with less and less of a role for international laws, human rights, global authorities, or a single power acting as the world police to try and get in the way. Much to the chagrin of Putin, Xi, and other proponents of a truly multipolar world, this is what it looks like when not just those nations, but all nations engage on the basis of multipolarity. As it turns out, Venezuela was very well within America's sphere of influence. Russia and Chinese influence be damned. The downfall of Nicolas Maduro isn't just a turning point for Venezuela, it's a turning point for Latin America and for the entire world. In the coming weeks and months, we're going to learn a lot more about where all this change is going to lead, and these and other burning questions are all going to be answered. For now, though, Venezuela's leadership has been changed by force, and neither Venezuela nor any of its longtime allies were able to do very much about it.
Supremacy World War III is a free online PvP strategy game set in modern global warfare. Click the link in the description to get an exclusive starter pack with the Elite Railgun, a $40 unit, free for new players for the next 30 days. Thank you for watching.